everybody, and welcome back to Victory World Cup, sponsored by Elgato. We are headed into round 3 for the day, and I am joined this time with Gabby. I'm so excited. Gabby, how are ya?
Good. You know, Sierra, I don't think we've actually casted together before, so I'm really excited that we finally get to work together, and especially with such a hype match coming up, it's going to be a great time.
I know this is like a day of firsts for me. First, like I get to cast with Lou, then I get to cast with you. Like this is absolutely fantastic, and no better way to do it than for World Cup, because I mean, last match was so much fun. I know the first match I saw you cast was an absolute banger as well. So I have the highest of hopes going into our third match of the day.
Oh, me too. What's really awesome is that now that we're at the group stage, I think that there's been a lot of emphasis on team building and making sure that you're bringing the right Pokemon. And like we saw in games 1 and 2 that we featured today, we saw some like really solid teams, but with like little differences that make the team stand out. I mean, you guys got Shedinja on stream last round, and that is very exciting. So I think we saw a little preview of the teams that we're going to be featuring this round, but let's take a look at the overall stage of play for this group, as we are going to be featuring Thailand versus Portugal. We're going all the way back to group 1 like Lou and I covered in round 1.
Yeah, and this should be a super fun set of matches here going into this group, and then the other group of course being India and El Salvador.
All right, so we've seen the overall group stage. Let's take a look at how the matches have broken down so far. Currently, Thailand is leading 4 wins to 2 wins on Portugal's side of the field with 2 games left to go. So if Portugal is able to win both of these games, they will be able to force a tie, at which point we will start looking at the overall games won, which honestly, I'm just doing some mental math here. It looks like it could be very close, but a lot of fun teams I'm seeing used so far by both of these teams. I think there's a Zygarde and an Aegislash on a Norwich's team right up top, and that's really special. A shout outs to that combination. That's amazing.
There's a lot of fun things happening here. We're seeing some Tornadus on both sides here, as well. There is an Yveltal on Portugal's side, which always makes me happy. So a lot of really fun teams. I'm really excited for this though. The last 2 matches, there are still so many outstanding matches to be played within the divisions that yes, you want to be getting the win for your country, but a loss doesn't mean you're out. Whereas this, there is a lot of pressure on Portugal here because João needs to be getting this win to be keeping this country in contention here. So there's going to be a lot of pressure. And little side note, because I'm eyeing it up in the top corner, probably like a fantastic logo. If you see that ho, that's, we were talking about it beforehand, but I have to point it out. It's so cute.
All the logos are good, and I believe there's a Twitter post on the Victory Road Twitter that actually has all of them superimposed together. So if you haven't seen that yet, I highly recommend you check it out because the art for this tournament has been absolutely fantastic.
For sure, everybody doing the best with the art and with the teams we're representing. But enough about the logos. It's time to be getting into the players and what they're going to be bringing. And I was just talking about Yveltal, and that's actually what João is going to be bringing into this match here. So that's super exciting. I mean, the fact that there is another teammate of his using it means that this is something that they've prepped and practiced, potentially even maybe the same team. It's going to be paired with a lot of fantastic, strong Pokemon here. There's going to be that Rillaboom. It's going to be that Urshifu. Volcarona is a fantastic pairing with it, and it's all going to be rounded out with a Stakataka and a Landorus.
Yeah, so João has some really interesting opportunities here for speed control with that Stakataka and the Trick Room. You have the Volcarona for disruption. Flame Body is one of those abilities that you have to be very careful about because as soon as you connect a physical attack and your attacker gets burned, that is going to be a huge problem. And Yveltal is honestly one of the more bulkier restricted Pokemon available in this format right now. You can give it an Assault Vest if you'd like, but really the key move is Oblivion Wing. Fantastic typing, fantastic flying type attack that also heals you as well. So I'm really excited to see how this Yveltal team is going to be facing off against Chaiyawat's team. Since we're doing a bit of the classic mix-up here, the X and the Y, the Yveltal and the Xerneas. It's really these classic clashes of titans that makes me excited.
I know we're in Galar region right now, but this is a true throwback to Kalos, and it's really going to be which one of these restricteds reigns victorious, which, you know, I love a little bit of lore going into these battles. And we're going to see it paired with a lot of the same Pokemon here with that Volcarona. You're just talking about the utility that it could offer, and it's going to be this time around, which the ability to be able to redirect gives Xerneas the opportunity to be setting up. And of course, the AO pressures with things like Rillaboom and Incineroar all rounded out with an Urshifu, but a Regieleki as well.
Yeah, so let's go ahead into team preview to talk about how these trainers are going to match up because, you know, like you mentioned, Sierra, both these trainers do have use of this fire, water, grass core with the Volcarona, the Rillaboom, and the Urshifu, with Chaiyawat also having Incineroar. I think that sort of switching triangle, if you will, is going to make or the revolving door. How could I forget about the revolving door? Is really going to impact this matchup because it's such a fundamental thing in Pokemon. You always want to switch around so you have that type advantage, you have the pressure of those priority moves, you have the intimidate on your side of the field, and I'm really curious to see if these trainers are going to go for that sort of slow play style in game one as they feel each other out, or if we're going to see the classic I'm just gonna lead Xerneas and press Geomancy and you're gonna have to stop me lead coming out here from Chaiyawat.
I mean, if you get that opportunity to be going for that Geomancy, then it is a dangerous position because it's like Geomancy being able to get those boosts, the special attack boost, speed boost, like it's absolutely incredible. It is going to be facing down against a Rillaboom and a Volcarona, so Rillaboom having access to things of Fake Out is something that could stop it, especially since that Fake Out does at least outspeed the Incineroars.
It does, and also that Volcarona activating its Grassy Seed for the defense boost, that is something that Chaiyawat's going to have to be very careful about, especially if he brought the Urshifu Rapid Strike in the back to take down that Volcarona. You know, I don't think the Xerneas necessarily goes for Geomancy during this turn. I think there's too much pressure on the field with Fake Out. However, if Chaiyawat feels comfortable with it, he could, one, just predict and go for it, or two, possibly wait for the second turn.
Not feeling too confident in it this time around, is going to just go for the Dazzling Gleam, but Volcarona feeling actually pretty secure and going for a setup, and is going to go for that Quiver Dance. So it's like the discount version of the Geomancy. You're not getting quite the same boost, but being able to at least start putting that pressure on in that way is absolutely fantastic.
It is, and Volcarona also has a type advantage against Xerneas as well. You know, thanks to its fire typing, it's going to resist those fairy type attacks. So if João uses the fact that Xerneas doesn't feel comfortable to Geomancy here and is forced to switch out to get a second or possibly even third Quiver Dance in, this Volcarona is going to become quite the threat on its own.
And not wanting that threat to be taken down, João is going to just protect it. Xerneas, though, with other plans, just looking to try and deal more and more damage to this Rillaboom, firing off with a Moonblast. You turn to pivot out, dealing the smallest amount of chip, which I'm sure is just going to be all recovered with that Grassy Terrain anyways, but being able to pivot into the Stack Attack. Of course, Xerneas pairs good against Yveltal, but not as well with Stack Attack, which means it's a fantastic bring into this match. But it's going to be Roar from Incineroar here, so no more boost for that Volcarona, and Rillaboom's going to hit the field again, but at least it has Fake Out pressure back on the field.
Yeah, I mean, that's not the worst Pokemon for João to be forced to send out here. He does still also keep the mystery alive of what that last Pokemon is. I mean, we know it's Yveltal because we're watching from his perspective, but Chaiyawat doesn't have that confirmation yet. I think the reveal of the Stack Attack, though, is really what's going to dictate this turn. I don't think Chaiyawat can keep that Xerneas on the field as long as Stack Attack is around. Because it hasn't gone for Geomancy yet, Gyro Ball is not a guaranteed knockout. So, you know, Xerneas could get one more Moonblast in if knocking out that Rillaboom is a priority for Chaiyawat, but you definitely don't want Xerneas to go on the offensive here. And if you have a Pokemon in the back that can slow things down and handle Trick Room a lot better than Xerneas, now is certainly the time to reveal it.
Of course, I mean, Rillaboom, not the slowest, but it would at least deal better than the Xerneas would against this Stakataka. So it's going to be hitting the field as Stakataka, of course. Looking to put João in any position here in Trick Room is just going to take the opportunity to set that up.
Yeah, the Rillaboom now can use Grassy Glide for some priority damage on Stakataka, so you don't have to worry about flinching, you don't have to worry about, you know, missing your opportunity to attack, but Chaiyawat still is going to be on the back foot for these Trick Room turns. Can switch Pokemon around to try and get access to enough uses of Fake Out to, again, stall out these turns, you know, cycle in, protect, do what you gotta do, but really, stalling out Trick Room needs to be Chaiyawat's priority right now.
Of course. We're going to swap out, though. Yveltal going to hit the field now that it feels pretty safe to do so with no Xerneas facing it down. But that swap in does mean it's going to be taking a big chunk of damage from this Flare Blitz from Incineroar. Of course, as we talked about, Oblivion Wing at least does have the opportunity for it to heal it back. So despite taking that big chunk of damage, relatively safe swap in this time around, especially since Sakataka now can actually start putting some offensive pressure.
Yeah, and this Yveltal will certainly enjoy the slower play as well, since that's more turns for the Yveltal to heal its health back up, and I think more importantly, doesn't have to worry about its attack or special attack being dropped too low by the Incineroar, as it's really just meant to take advantage of slow play and not do so much damage like the Stakataka.
Did so much. Xerneas swapping in for the other slot. So Xerneas hitting the field. Rillaboom does take all of that damage, but at least is going to get to pivot out and it's going to be an Incineroar, so rebringing that Fake Out pressure back, though Xerneas not really at a safe spot to be doing anything here, as, you know, Sakataka and Trick Room is not something it can pair up against.
No, I mean, if you want to make a prediction about what the Yveltal's holding, we know it's the Assault Vest, but Chaiyawat might not know that yet. You could go for a Fake Out onto the Stakataka and then Moonblast the Yveltal this turn and sort of force João to either switch or otherwise protect and start stalling out his own Trick Room. But I think the only reason Xerneas feels comfortable on the field right now, as Yveltal was able to heal up some of its health thanks to that Oblivion Wing, is the fact that Incineroar is standing next to it with Fake Out as an option.
Of course. So João in a position now, having to kind of think of where this Fake Out is going to be going, not wanting to risk this going down from it, and knowing that there's potential for the Fake Out to just go into the Sakataka and not allow it to deal with the Xerneas as needed. So be interesting to see what he decides to go for.
I mean, I don't think Yveltal is going to flinch for what it's worth, and seeing that it does have access to Snarl, it's always nice to get those Snarls connected with Xerneas early because it offsets the cost of a possible Geomancy later on, but you have to be comfortable with the Yveltal going down this turn and knowing that this is possibly the last attack you're going to get if that's what you pick.
Of course, so the Sakataka, though, going to stay safe in the back as it is going to pivot. Rillaboom hitting the field. Fake Out is going to go into that slot, so it's just a little bit of chip onto the Rillaboom. Moonblast coming out onto the Yveltal, dealing a bunch of damage. Of course, the super effective hit is going to be taking that restricted out of there.
And that is some interesting information, as I believe the dimensions are still twisted and that Xerneas was able to underspeed the Yveltal, so most likely not trained in speed like many Xerneas are. A lot of times with Geomancy, especially if that's your key strategy, you can afford to run it a little slower and a little bit bulkier, knowing that once you get the speed boosts from Geomancy, and really even with Fake Out support, that speed stat isn't as important as it used to be. So that is definitely a good note for João moving forwards in this game, because you might not want to set Trick Room up in the future because of that.
Yeah, of course, Sakataka does so well in Trick Room, but if this Xerneas is going to underspeed the other Pokemon in it, it's a tricky situation to be. But see on Chaiyawat's side, the Incineroar swapping out, and a swap from the Rillaboom as well, just going into that Volcarona. Xerneas is going to avoid the Rock Slide this time around, though. Urshifu is going to be taking a little bit of chip from it, but he certainly didn't want to be missing that attack at least, and it gives the opportunity to just fire a Moonblast into the Volcarona. Takes it well, but that's still not a fantastic miss from that Rock Slide.
No, it wouldn't have done as much damage as the Gyro Ball, but it might have chipped Xerneas enough so that a Gyro Ball pre-Geomancy would have been able to pick up that KO. So a very unfortunate miss for João, but I think in the grand scheme of things, the fact that the Xerneas and the Yveltal, you know, the Yveltal is essentially faster than the Xerneas outside of Trick Room, I think that's really the key takeaway from this game. I think João still has a shot at winning. I think that the Volcarona is going to have to redirect a lot of these attacks away from the Rillaboom and the Stakataka as a result, because it's otherwise going to really struggle to deal damage right now.
Well, the Dazzling Gleam's not really going to care too much about a redirection here, as it is going to take down that Rillaboom. Volcarona, though, going to set up a Quiver Dance, but it's so low on HP now, and of course, Urshifu going to fire off a Surging Strikes. Each hit does give the opportunity to get it burned, but it only needs the one hit. Does get the burn on that one hit, though, so a little bit of Volcarona going down.
And Stakataka is the only Pokemon remaining on Joao's side of the field, and you know that burn is going to come in handy, as you know, when it comes to how the damage calculation is done for a burn, you know, the critical hit is applied and then the burn is applied. So as a result, even though this Urshifu is going to be dealing less damage overall, you know, it's not like with stat drops or stat raises or whatever where critical hits will ignore them. So that's something really important to keep in mind as we wrap up this end game. If Stakataka can get one attack in, he might be fine.
I don't know though. It is going to hang on for this turn though, so not quite going down, but I mean a 6 HP Stakataka against 4 Pokemon still. Don't see too much happening here, as it looks like Chaiyawat's going to be taking this first game.
Yeah, it could have been interesting had the Stakataka gone for like a Gyro Ball or something, especially after close combat. That might have been able to pick up the knockout on Urshifu, but you're absolutely right. Unfortunately for Stakataka, the speed control is no longer on its side, and that will wrap up this game 1. But a very interesting game 1 it was. I really loved the tech that we saw on both sides of the field. I loved how Chaiyawat just did not feel pressured to go for Geomancy that entire game. I think that if you are playing Xerneas in Series 10, or really in general, you know, I think everybody's heard the stories from 2016 and then 2019 when Xerneas Geomancies, and then if you can't deal with it, it's game over. And I think that you have to be cognizant of what that pressure brings on the field alone. And if you keep not going for it, that's still something that has to be on your opponent's mind throughout the game. And I think what we saw that game was just João being very careful to try and, you know, not set up the Geomancy, try and, you know, get those Pokemon knocked out so Xerneas wouldn't feel comfortable, but Chaiyawat just was one step ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the Moonblast was able to just do a good, consistent amount of damage, and something that could really, like, check it with that Volcarona got roared out by the Incineroar. So there's a lot of things revealed in that match, which are fantastic for both players to know going into the second match as well. The fact that the Xerneas was able to underspeed the Yveltal in Trick Room, fantastic information to be taken into a game 2. But so far in this Battle of Kalos, Xerneas is a little bit ahead.
It is, and I'm really glad you brought up that Incineroar again as well. Roar is one of the more, I think, interesting ways to stop Trick Room. When you think about it, a lot of times people will run either Taunt or their own Trick Room user in order to keep the dimensions in the twisted order that you prefer. But with Roar, you always will be at a higher priority tier than Trick Room, but lower than everything else. So, and you can force Pokemon to switch out rather than go for the taunt, and it's such a unique way to apply pressure, and it's not something you see on Incineroar often. It makes me wonder what other moves this Incineroar has access to. I wouldn't be surprised if it were Flare Blitz plus Throat Chop on top of that, and a Parting Shot to boot, since those seem to be the moves that Incineroar needs to rely on most. But knowing that the Incineroar can force Pokemon off the field, especially when this Volcarona has indicated that it wants to take advantage of those stat boosts that Grassy Seed and the Quiver Dance provide, is really key to keep in mind in this game too.
Oh, 100%. The amount of utility that Roar can bring is just fantastic. Speaking of fantastic, let's talk about this lead change on Joao's end here. We're going to be seeing Landorus taking the field. Not something that was brought in the last match, but I'm excited to see how it fares up against this. But it'll just be Incineroar, Xerneas lead from Chaiyawat's end, though the Incineroar swapping out into that Rillaboom.
It is, and Xerneas correctly protecting here in front of a special attacking Landorus, always something you got to be careful for.
Of course, the swap in though going to just take that fake out as Sludge Bomb is revealed on the Landorus here. The Xerneas, of course, nice and safe and protected, not going to be taking that hit, but how about having suspicions confirmed and knowing that this Landorus can easily deal with this Xerneas.
Yeah, that is one of the nice things about Landorus Incarnate, is that it gets access to Sheer Force and can use its surprisingly high special attack to do a lot of damage. So João keeping it safe for later, I think, is definitely the right call, as Stakataka doesn't have to worry about taking much damage from either of these two Pokemon right now.
And that being said, it not really worrying about the damage makes it a fantastic switch in here. Takes the fake out as well, taking the Moonblast. And João getting the opportunity to just go for a U-turn into Chaiyawat's own Rillaboom, picking up a decent amount of chip and getting the opportunity to just pivot out into a Pokemon of his liking. We see that he's eyeing up that Landorus, and it is going to be the Landorus hitting the field now that the fake out turn on the other end is no longer pressured.
And I think if you're João, you have a pretty easy choice this turn in terms of moves. You have the perfect setup to go on the offensive, as the Xerneas probably not going to stay on the field, and there's only so much damage the Grassy Glide from Rillaboom can do to Landorus or Stakataka. You know, maybe protect to keep yourself safe for a turn, see what Chaiyawat's going to switch in, but I think it's pretty safe to assume that the Xerneas will not leave itself open for damage this turn. But we could have seen a big read here from these trainers, but instead Chaiyawat just matching the protect from that Landorus.
Yeah, protects, but drum beating and coming out from this Rillaboom, not something we see too often. Both trainers just targeting into the protected Pokemon. But I mean, Gabby, what do you think about that drum beating?
That is such a fun adjustment on this Rillaboom. So we have drum beating on Rillaboom, we have roar on Incineroar. I kind of wish that we would also see a Inteleon on this team, just because I'm curious what Chaiyawat would put on it as, you know, that signature starter move. But still, given how that turn played out, I wouldn't be surprised if we see some switches and some reads to anticipate a switch, but instead Xerneas staying on the field.
Yeah, Earth Power going to be dealing a good amount of damage, but not as much as Sludge Bomb would have been. Anticipating the switch there, and Landorus is going to go down with that beating drum. And I mean, that's a big turn, but at least Jarwell being able to cover for the fact if the Xerneas wanted to stay in, which is exactly what's going to happen here, as what Earth Power couldn't do, the Sakataka will be able to accomplish with that Jarwell and take down that big bad restricted.
Yeah, and João just doing a very good job of predicting that the most logical switch for that Xerneas that turn would have been the Incineroar. So if you use Earth Power and Gyro Ball, yes, you do take a little damage from whatever attack Xerneas goes for if it decides to attack, but more importantly, you guarantee the knockout and you clear the way for your Yveltal to take the field very comfortably. This Yveltal and Oblivion Wing, we've seen it do about maybe 30 or 40 40% to the Incineroar. That's being a little bit generous, but it does a decent amount. Definitely threatens the Rillaboom, and I think more importantly of all of them, gives itself the ability to heal back any damage it would take from a Flare Blitz or other attack that Chaiyawat has. So I'm curious if Chaiyawat has the ability to remove Yveltal from the field at this point. I don't think we'll be seeing any Trick Room plays from the Stack Attack either. So really, João, on the offensive, if Chaiyawat's able to get a knockout this turn, he could switch things up, but it's going to be tough.
Yeah, big Oblivion Wing coming out, dealing a good amount to that Rillaboom, as Rillaboom actually fares back with a decent amount, picking up that critical hit. I mean, all amount of chip damage onto the Yveltal is going to be adding up. The more damage, the better, the faster you can try and deal with it before it just heals everything back up with the Oblivion Wings. And it is going to be switching into that Urshifu, put that pressure on it. And Incineroar going on the offensive as well with that Flare Blitz into that slot. So a lot of damage being done to the Yveltal. And the burn! This Yveltal's not having a fun time out here.
It isn't, and the Rock Slide miss as well on that Urshifu. That, it could be huge, especially if the Urshifu is holding a Focus Sash. That means it will be able to take 2 hits of damage. Incineroar dropping down to the yellow from that attack, but still more than capable of outspeeding the Stack Attack of this turn and getting 1 more Flare Blitz in at least. So a great use of U-turn there to get the Urshifu in safely with a little bit of luck as well. The big question is, how much damage will these Searching Strikes do now that the Urshifu is no longer burned? Could just go for a close combat as well. If you still have your Focus Sash active, you don't need to worry necessarily about a stat drop making these knockouts harder.
Of course, an Oblivion Wing doing a bunch of damage to that Urshifu and being able to heal up a lot of damage. But the fact that it's now going to be taking these hits is not going to help out. Surging Strikes coming out into the Yveltal, dealing a fair amount of damage. It's not going to be quite enough to be picking it up here. But of course, there's still the Incineroar with the opportunity to move. It's not actually going to go for an attacking move, though. Instead, going for the parting shot into that Stack Attack and looking to pivot out and leaving the Yveltal out on the field for another turn.
And I think that's okay. It's true that the Yveltal is going to be able to heal up its health with the Oblivion Wing, but you can't do that if you're flinched. And I think those fake out flinch turns is exactly what Chaiyawat's hoping for in order to give him the win for this game.
Of course, the Rillaboom hitting the field, having that opportunity, not fantastic. And another miss. The double Rock Slide miss here. I mean, Joel not having things going his way right now, as those Rock Slides, I mean, there's no damage being done from that Stack Attack. So that's definitely unfortunate. Of course, Yveltal going to be taking that burn. There is the opportunity, though. I mean, Joel still has 3 Pokemon, so yes, there is that fake out pressure on the other end, but I mean, at least if there's a swap, it can't do too much. But the Yveltal is so damaged and not looking so great right now, but at least it does get to stick around to try and cause some havoc later on.
It does, and I think João had to switch there because those 2 Rock Slides would have added up to a knockout on this Urshifu, and Yveltal is really his best bet for taking that Urshifu down. For now, though, close combat is enough to seal the knockout on that Stack Attack, forcing the Yveltal back out onto the field. But more importantly, João does have access to fake out for 1 more turn, and the big question is, who do you fake out, and how do you give yourself the best chance to win, knowing that your Yveltal is at such low health? As tempting as it is to go for the KO onto that Urshifu Rapid Strike, I think you use your fake out to flinch the Urshifu. You go for the Oblivion Wing into the Rillaboom, but then you also have to worry about Grassy Glide just taking you out. So it's a very tough decision here, especially if Chaiyawat isn't locked into a move, which we've seen him use both Surging Strikes and close combat. So if hypothetically he has access to both Grassy Glide and Aqua Jet, I think that he can still pull this game off.
Yeah, eyeing up that Sucker Punch, though. A way to try and make something happen, but it's going to happen there, as of course Sucker Punch only works if it was ready in an attack, and a swap into Incineroar means that the Yveltal won't be able to do anything here. So trying to cover for both possible outcomes. Chaiyawat not risking anything, and Urshifu nonetheless also going to be going for that protect. Rillaboom though, just get the grass, but it's gonna hit into the protect, and that's a tricky spot to be in, because now, I mean, Voltal is going. Sorry, I thought it's like maybe I'm seeing things. I thought I saw it kick Sucker Punch here. That's my bad. I honestly, I'm gonna blame the heat here. Going to go for the Villavian Wing, get some healing, but yeah, that's my bad on that one.
Oh, don't apologize. These battles move so quickly if you're not paying attention and you're distracted by something like the heat or maybe the light or, you know, one of the other myriad of things you have to juggle when you're casting a game. It's totally easy to get distracted, so no worries whatsoever. I think, though, João, keeping that Sucker Punch secret for now, because it really would change the way the game works, and as much as it would be tempting to go for that priority damage and try and find a knockout, I think the Yveltal is at such low health it needs to prioritize that as much as it's tempting to go for those Sucker Punches for that damage.
Of course, fake out from Incineroar means won't be able to do anything. As well, followed up with a priority Aqua Jet from the Urshifu means it is going to be going down. Woodhammer coming out to just deal some damage, able to take out that Incineroar critical hit, but I mean, it's Rillaboom against the world now, but at least Rillaboom's still at almost full HP here.
It is, and by prioritizing the knockout on the Incineroar, Rillaboom gave it its best shot at taking out both the Urshifu and the Rillaboom on Chaiyawat's side of the field. The Urshifu will easily be knocked out by a single Grassy Glide at this point in time, and the Rillaboom on Joao's side of the field has so much more health. You have to wonder how many U-turns it would take to knock out both these Pokemon. If Joao is able to connect, I think it'll be 2 U-turns on Chaiyawat's Rillaboom prior to Chaiyawat taking out Joao's Rillaboom. That could be the game, but close combat, I think it's such a good move. That might have just sealed the deal for Chaiyawat.
Of course, the amount of damage, the one fantastic thing Joao's Rillaboom had going for it was the fact that it was almost full HP, but the fake out and that close combat means it's going to be brought down real low, and no more Grassy Trains means no more potential for priority Grassy Glide into that Urshifu. So, I mean, there's a lot Rillaboom can do, but there's not anything it's going to be able to do now, as this Urshifu is going to be going for that close combat and take it out for a 2-0 victory.
Exactly. Like, it was very well played by Joao at the end. I think he did a fantastic job of like keeping that win condition alive in his head. You know, as long as I have access to priority Grassy Glide, all I have to do is knock out the Pokemon next to the Urshifu. You know, even if Urshifu gets 3 crits or gets a close combat, I can take one of those. It'll probably be fine. But unfortunately, that grassy terrain just running out at the end. So very well played by both these trainers. I love the adjustments brought into game 2, especially from Joao, but Chaiyawat just had such a unique team with that drum beating and with the roar on the Incineroar. I think those really caught Joao by surprise.
Yeah, I mean, fantastic set of coverage moves to really be able to just handle whatever was being thrown at him. And I mean, the fact that the Volcarona in that first game couldn't even like set up. And yes, the second game, the Xerneas was lost pretty early on, but the other components of the team being able to just pick up that win. I mean, that Water Grass Fire core is just so strong, and this Pokemon offers such utility that even without a restricted, they can just do enough to be pulling back a match.
Yeah, and I think the key thing to keep an eye out for if you're playing a team like Chaiyawat's team is that if you play through game 1 and your opponent is comfortable not using Geomancy, I think you definitely bring the Pokemon to pressure the Xerneas, like we saw the Landorus Incarnate in that game 2 and the Stakataka in both games. But you have to make the assumption that, well, they didn't go for it game 1, chances are they won't be going for it game 2, and adjust your targeting appropriately. I think Joao did a great job of doing that, but it really was those 2 rock slide misses on top of, you know, just great positioning from both these trainers that tilted the board in Chaiyawat's favor. But a very well played game. Unfortunately, it looks like Portugal will be out because now they can't tie up the score. But, you know, this is a round robin. They still have 2 weeks to get those wins and keep themselves alive.
Oh, for sure. And the fact that it came down to just the last 2 matches, I mean, there are some strong players, so there's definitely the potential for a comeback against another country in the coming weeks.
All right, so that's 3 down, 1 to go here today on the World Cup of Pokemon VGC, brought to you by Victory Road and Elgato. So please stay tuned, everybody. We've had some great matches so far, and our last one of the day is going to be super hype as well.